Today, I want to talk about John Muir. John Muir made a big impact in my life. In my 40s, mainly, is when that really started to happen. When my Christian faith began to crumble on me and it was just wasn't filling the void, I found myself strangely drawn to the wilderness. And I wanted to go alone. My wife at the time, well, I guess she's still my wife, amazingly enough, but at the time, my wife, here, that's a better way to say it. At the time, my wife was really worried that I was going to die, that a bear would eat me or I would fall off a cliff. And we made a deal where I got a GPS and so they could track me if I died and they could find the body because, as she explained to me, if they can't find the body, she doesn't get the insurance money. We had 3 kids at the time, and I know she loves me, but I think she really was, kind of worried about having to raise the kids alone if something happened to me. Anyway, we've worked through that, and today she's very comfortable with me going to the woods alone. Partly our kids are grown, so, maybe if she loses me, yeah, no big loss. In any case, it created some marital challenges. I kept reading John Muir. I think I've read nearly everything he's written, and I just really resonated with him. We went to his home in Martinez, and as I was reading some of his quotes and just sort of, soaking up the vibe, I just felt like this guy, I feel so akin to him. One of the things he said is, when I go outside, it's like I'm going inside. And when I go inside, it's like I'm going outside. In other words, what I consider my real home is the outdoors, and these boxes that we live in are foreign and strange to me. Another thing that we laughed about was that his wife would look at him after a while and say, "John, you've got low altitude sickness. You need to get back up in the woods." So I just really loved reading his writings. What is it about his writings that hit me? Well, let me just read you one of his famous quotes. He says, "Climb the mountains and get their good tidings. Nature's peace will flow into you as sunshine flows into trees. The winds will blow their own freshness into you, and the storms their energy, while cares will drop off like autumn leaves." So there's this really deep love of nature that Muir had, and this desire to just plunge in some of the most insane ways that you can imagine. He tells one story, for example, of going up to Yosemite Falls, and he's way up high. He was actually herding some sheep up in Tuolumne Meadows, and he took this little side trip over to the top of Yosemite Falls, and he decided he wanted to go out on this little ledge. And so he's a rock climber, so he crawls out there, and he gets really right up close to the water, and the wind shifted, and it just pounded him, and he's clinging onto this rock, and he's wondering, am I going to live or die here? Finally, the wind shifts away, and he is able to, on these wet, slippery rocks, climb off, and off he goes. But so, he has these kinds of crazy adventures, and he just does the wildest things. But it's not just his near-death experiences that I think drew me in. It was this voracious appetite for reality. Like capital R, he just wanted to experience this world full strength. And he recognized the artificiality of human structures. When he was older, he went back up into the mountains one time, and I remember he tripped, he stumbled, and he said, "I was cursing my stupid feet for becoming, like lazy walking on flat sidewalks." I mean, it's just like sidewalks are so artificial, these perfectly smooth sheets of concrete that just extend for miles, and nature's not like that. And it's like he wants the real thing, and there's something something about that that just really resonated with me. And, I think resonates with many people. We know deep down that our lives are man made, artificial, imagined by us, created by us. And when you live in a world where it's all about computer screens, which I'm reading off of right now, or cars and roads and houses and fans and air conditioning and digital this and digital that, it's all of that is so, it's real, but these are human constructs that we mistake for reality, capital R. I'm sorry I say this so much, but it's one of the things I've said that I just am most proud of. Our superpower as human beings is our ability to tell stories, to create things, to imagine. Our Achilles heel is that we believe them. And when you go out in nature alone, it just shatters that bubble. One of the things that happens to me when I go out alone, day one, my mind is just bubbling. I'm thinking things and I'm wondering about stuff, and I'm thinking about problems back home, or maybe I'm wrestling with some problem. When I'm out there alone, I kind of, after maybe sometime after day two, I start to get a little bored with my own thoughts, and I just sort of let them, I just abandon them. I'm not drawn into them so much anymore. And by day three, there's this peace, there's this stillness that comes over me where I'm just purely experiencing nature. There's not this barrier of my cognition, of my concepts. It's just pure direct contact. And when I get to that point, it's not like this is just one glory after another, but there are moments where it's so intense that it's deeply spiritual. I can remember coming around a corner and seeing this really oddly shaped tree and just laughing and talking to it. And I would go up to trees and hug them. And I just felt like this was all, I didn't, the veil between me and the nature just got very thin, and I just felt so connected. I felt like that tree that I was laughing with, was just like we were sharing a joke together. That's how it felt. So that for me was a big part of my shift from faith, that is the tenets of the Christian faith, to a life which I describe now as wonder. One of maybe the most famous things that John Muir ever said was, "Not all who wander are lost." I love that. But I even like to spin that around and say, "Not all who are lost wander." In other words, it's possible to admit your lostness, to embrace your lostness, and you don't have to wander. And facing up for me is a way to embrace my lostness and not wander. And I don't wander by wondering, but it's wonder that sets me free from wander. It's wonder is what I embrace and try to embrace regularly. And for me, this breathing exercise is really helpful. But just to kind of detach from all this human stuff and just remember that I don't know, that it's mystery, that nature is beyond me, bigger than me. One other writer that I have to mention, just in passing, is Annie Dillard, who hasn't written that many books that are that famous, but in the 70s, she wrote a book called Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. I read that book 10 times. I read it every summer for quite a few years in a row because it just spoke so deeply to me. She has the same spirit as John Muir. And in this book, she just goes and she's spending a summer, a year, I don't remember how long, by this little creek, Tinker Creek. And she just observes things. And one time she describes going out to this little creek and she's admiring a frog. And all of a sudden, it just collapses. Like she says, like a kicked tent. It just poof, gone. She's like, what? And she looks into the water and she sees this bug swimming away. And here's what she writes about this. So, how does the giant water bug kill the frog? Well, first of all, it seizes the victim using its grasping forelegs, which have inward facing hooks. Once the frog is in the bug's grasp, the bug hugs it tightly and quickly paralyzes it with enzymes administered during a particularly vicious bite. One bite is all it takes. Through the resulting puncture wound, the bug shoots some fast acting poison into the frog's body, which has the effect of dissolving all the poor creature's muscles, bones, and organs, leaving nothing behind but a deflated bag of skin floating on top of the water. Annie Dillard will talk about walking through the trees or observing a deer or the birds or these things and just be filled with like worship, with wonder. But she also will see the dark side, that nature is not, it's not like this cartoon that we draw, like a Disney cartoon with all the birds singing in harmony and everything getting along with everything else. In fact, when she was interviewed about the book, she said, I'm surprised that people didn't understand that it's really a horror book. Because in addition, it's honest, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's honest. It sees not just the beauty, but also the horror. And that the horror is part of the wonder too. I experienced that once. I was out on a particularly long, in fact, it's the favorite trip I've ever taken. And I was up in the north part of Yosemite, kind of up where nobody goes. And I entered it from Immigrant Wilderness, which is to the north of that. Anyway, I'm up by this lake, Mary Lake. I'm all by myself. There's no one up there. And I was going around through the bushes and I saw this little creature that I didn't even know what it was. And I was like busting through bushes that I doubt any fool would go around that way. I mean, I shouldn't have, but there I was. And I'm looking at this creature and I don't know what it is. And it looked like it was a surprise to see me as I was surprised to see it. It didn't have a name for me. I didn't have a name for it. We just looked at it. It wasn't afraid. It just looked at me. Pretty sure it was a pika, by the way, now that I've had time to research it, but I hadn't seen a pika up close like that before. And when I came around the corner and it was just sitting on the rock, and I just felt that warmth of nature. But there were clouds building up over Tower Peak, which sits up above Mary Lake, and the lightning, and it was scary. And my tent was just right below those peaks, and I'm thinking, man, I hope I don't get fried tonight. But as I made my way on around the lake and the sun was starting to set, I looked up at some peaks that were off in the distance, and they were so big, so dark, so foreboding that they terrified me. And I know that sounds crazy to say you just looked at mountains and were afraid, but yeah, because it was so vast, so far beyond me that it was just, I mean, it wasn't like this. And sometimes say, well, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And people would be quick to say, well, it doesn't mean fear like afraid. It means like respect or something like that. But I'm telling you, in the shadow of those mountains that night, it was just pure terror. And I was simply afraid of the universe that I saw, of these mountains that were just so, they were just this no to me. And I made my way on around the lake and caught the first golden trout I ever caught in my life. It was only about 6 inches long, but it was so beautiful. And then I let it go, of course, but wow. And then up to my tent, and here I am. I did not get struck by lightning, but that's just to give you an example of, I mean, that was a particularly intense afternoon, but that's what an afternoon in the wilderness was like for me after I've been in the wilderness for a few days and just am experiencing it so directly. So yeah, I owe a lot to John Muir and Annie Dillard, and most of all, to nature. because nature strips away the illusion of knowing. Socrates famously said, true knowledge exists in knowing that you know nothing. That is exactly where I began, and that is a premise of Facing Up. This is what happened to me in my dark night. I got to a point where I came to a firm conviction. It was the first thing that I knew that as after I lost my faith, the first thing that I could really grab onto and say, I'm sure about this. And what I was sure about was that I didn't know anything. And that opened the door to wonder. So thank you, Annie Dillard. Thank you, John Muir, for being true souls entering into reality, capital R, and sharing that. It's enticing. It's contagious. And it seems to me that people these days have a deep hunger for that kind of direct experience, which might be why, like everybody's trying to get out in nature and experience it. I'm a big fan. Go do it. I need to go do it. I hope now. I just need to get a solo trip in this summer. It's tough. I got two of my kids are getting married this summer, so that sort of puts a little bit of crunch on the old vacation plans. But some things are just too important not to do.